Gather round and welcome back to another edition of Todd Talks College Football. And let me tell you, folks, we got a special edition. This is the first 5 thoughts on this week in college football for the 2025 season for week 0. That's right, folks. We had college football yesterday and it was amazing. The games weren't great, but we had a good time watching them and just happy that the college football fanaticism is back and in the spotlight, baby. That's right. We are so excited for this college football season. Like I told you before, I think this is going to be a crazy season, and we almost saw some crazy antics this weekend and almost saw a big upset. So let's get down to it. Thought 1 on this week in college football. All right, let's start over in Ireland. That's right. We had the first game of the season over with the Irish, and it was the Iowa State Cyclones and the Kansas State Wildcats. And it was a 24-21 game, folks. Iowa State got to win. It was a real mess in the first half. 22 minutes into the game, we had 4 turnovers. We had pouring down rain. We had missed passes. We had a 4th down stop inside the 7, which I think was a stupid play by the Kansas State coach. You get a turnover, you get the ball marching down, and you're inside the 5-yard line at 4th and 1. These are free points. Take the 3 points and move on in a wet game. But no, he decided to go for it on 4th and 1. Boom, Iowa State throws a safety or linebacker through the gap and blows up that play for a loss. Kansas State doesn't get any points. If you remember correctly, I told you they lost 24-21. Those points could have been the difference in tying that game up or maybe even winning the game for Kansas State. You know, Kansas State still looks like the same team they were last year, prone to make mistakes. They just can't get out of their own way sometimes. Avery Johnson had a decent game. What did he go? 21 of 30, 273 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing. But honestly, this team wasn't what many people thought was a Big 12 championship team. I did not walk away with that feeling in this Kansas State team at all. And then Iowa State, Rocco was 14 of 28 for 183 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a 50% completion rate. Now, yes, it was a little rainy at the beginning, but look, you're going to play in rain in America too. So you're going to have to be able to make these passes and get these balls out on time in the rain. And Rocco, he had a decent game. They obviously won the game at 24-21, but I wouldn't walk away saying either one of these teams look like they're a Big 12 contender. Yes, right. Neither one of these teams look like a Big 12 contender after that game. Now, granted, it was the first game. It was raining. They had to travel, which I think is ridiculous for college football teams to be traveling to Ireland to play football, but that's a whole nother show. But anyways, to move on here, I thought these were 2 average Big 12 teams playing each other. I don't think they're the caliber, the class that Arizona State is or was last year and should be this year. I have Iowa State in a Big 12 championship game, and they're going to have to play a whole hell of a lot better than they played yesterday to get even close to that. All right, let's get to the real fun of this story, though. After the game, we got Avery Johnson's dad and brother throwing fisticuffs with each other in the parking lot? What the hell is going on here? Florida State fell apart after they came back from Ireland last year when they lost to Georgia Tech. And it looks to me like the way Kansas State lost this game and the way the brother and the father of the quarterback were throwing each other, it looked like the father was trying to drown the son in a puddle. It was crazy. But anyways, I think this could be the beginning of the end for Kansas State. They look like an undisciplined football team. They got their parents and kids fighting in the parking lot. This just looks to me like another meltdown happening here similar to the Florida State last year for Kansas State. This does not look like a Big 12 championship team that a lot of experts thought they would be. I thought they'd be 9-3. They still could be 9-3, but I'm not going to buy what I saw yesterday with Avery Johnson and that football team with the mistakes they made. And then I'm sure they're going to get some questions this week. Why was your dad and brother fighting, trying to drown each other in the parking lot? That's going to be a fun conversation for the reporters. Anyways, great that college football was back. Kind of a lackluster game in the rain to start. But, Iowa State, they can still make the Big 12 championship game, but they're going to have to play better than they played yesterday. They got a lot of work. And Rocco, he's serviceable, but he's not going to go out there and win you a football game in a manner where he's got to throw for 300 or 400 yards in a game. He just doesn't have it, folks. He's a 50% completion guy. And Iowa State's going to have to win with defense. They did yesterday, but they got a lot of work to do there for the Cyclones. We'll see where they are in a couple weeks when they play Iowa, but great that football was back. I don't know that was one of the greatest games ever to start the season. Thought 2 on this week in college football. Let's move across the state of Kansas and the Rock Chalk Jayhawk. That's right, folks. Yesterday, now, they were playing Fresno State, so we got to look at the difference between Kansas State and Iowa State versus Kansas and Fresno State. Little bit of a difference in competition there, so we'll start with that. But I will say this. Kansas looked like a fast football team yesterday. They looked a lot faster than Fresno State, which is to be expected. But in the past, Kansas didn't look faster than anybody ever, for years and years and years. And now they look like a really fast football team yesterday. They really had to play. The tempo was great. Jalen Daniels, let's talk about this kid. He got hurt last year a little bit. He's back this year, full strength, 6 foot, 220 pounds, kick and throw the ball. He was 18 of 20, 176 yards yesterday, 2 TDs through the air. He really, really looked good. And if he can stay healthy, now I will say this, Fresno State did put some pressure on him and knock him around more than I would like to see in the first half. So I think that Kansas needs to fix that because this kid's not going to be able to go 12, 13 games if he's getting beat up like he was in the first half of the game, both with his running, but with some sacks and some things. He held in there, threw some great balls, but he got too much pressure than what they should have seen with Fresno State. But anyways, Kansas looks like a Big 12 championship competitor with the way they played yesterday, albeit to Fresno State and E.J. Warner. If you haven't heard of E.J. Warner, it is the son of Hall of Famer, Super Bowl champion, grocery store clerk, Kurt Warner. That's right, his son playing there at Fresno State, and he did not have a good game yesterday. He threw 2 interceptions. He did have a heck of a pass in the first half. He stood in there against 2 blitzers and threw a dime, but he just couldn't get it going yesterday. I was really hoping the kid would be able to make some big plays yesterday, give Kansas a little bit of a game. It didn't work out. I think it ended 31-7 was the final. But E.J. Warner, I thought I had some bigger hopes because his dad's Kurt Warner, but he just didn't have a great game yesterday. So back to what we were saying, Kansas looks like a competitor. We'll see. It's early. It was Fresno State, but I like what I saw with the Rock Chalk Jayhawk and the way that their speed looked and the way that Jalen Daniels was able to deliver the ball, get out of the pocket, and man, they really did look fast yesterday there in Kansas. Thought 3 on this week in college football. Let's talk about the Western Kentucky University Hilltoppers yesterday, folks, and Maverick McIver. I think I said that right. It's like MacGyver, but McIver. MCIVOR. Let me tell you, this kid put on a show yesterday. It was a really good game. They really took control of the game late in the third quarter into the fourth quarter. Ended up winning 41-24, but at one point they were down 24-20 in the third quarter, and Maverick was just lighting it up. Kid threw for 33 of 51 for 401 yards, 3 passing TDs, decided to run one in from 7 yards out to pretty much clinch the game. He has a big arm, folks, and the one thing about the Hilltoppers is they like to throw the ball down the field. This is a very interesting team because they're out of the Conference USA, and we spoke about that before, and we thought one team could come out of Conference USA, and that was the Liberty Flames. But the Hilltoppers have a very favorable schedule this year in Conference USA, considering they don't have Liberty on the schedule. So we could be looking for a Liberty versus WKU Hilltoppers championship game in Conference USA, which would be quite interesting. Now, I will say this, one of my favorite teams going into the year out of the Little Six, you've heard it before, was the Toledo Rockets. That's right, folks. Guess who goes to Toledo in just a couple of weeks? That's right, Western Kentucky. This could be a hell of a barn burner game. So keep it on your mind. September 6th in the Glass Bowl, the Hilltoppers against the Rockets, and it could be an explosion of points between these two football teams. I really liked Maverick McGuire. See, I can't even say it now. I'm all out of whack. Maverick McIver. There we go. This kid has a heck of an arm. Transferred out of Texas Tech. Abilene Christian, I think. Ended up at Western Kentucky. And he's real fun to watch. So if you get a chance to watch Western Kentucky football once in a while, I'd take a look at him. This could be a real exciting team, considering they got probably outside of Toledo and LSU left on their schedule. They probably got the worst schedule left in the country. So this team could go a long way if they can beat, obviously, the Rockets in a couple weeks. But could they give LSU a fun game the week before LSU goes to Oklahoma? Thought 4 on this week in college football. Let's move to Hawaii next here for thought number 4. And let me tell you something, folks. If you didn't stay up to watch the Stanford Cardinal and the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, you saved yourself from possibly one of the worst football games ever played in college football. Yes, Hawaii ended up winning this game on a field goal on the last play of the game to pull out a victory. But let me tell you, Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, you're all happy you won this game. And yes, I'll give your quarterback, Micah Elizondo, I think I said it wrong, but that's probably right. Anyways, he had to get a decent game. He was really banged up in the fourth quarter. You could tell it was almost a Byron Leftwich situation where, he could barely make it down the field after completed throws. But this Stanford team is pathetic. And I will never bring up Stanford again on this show as long as this season persists. This is a terrible football team. And quite frankly, they had this game won. They were driving the ball late in the fourth quarter to take this game into a position to win this game. And somehow they throw an interception to a defensive tackle or defensive end in the backfield. But, it was just terrible. Micah Ford, offensively for Stanford, was the only player that looked like he even belonged on a Division I football team, on the Stanford Cardinal football team. And this quarterback, Ben Gilbertson, this kid was 15 of 30, 109 yards, 3.6 yards of completion, and a QBR rating of 13.2. Now, folks, I don't know how much football you've watched, but that is almost the most pathetic QBR rating in the history of college football. It has to be some kind of record. And the fact that this Stanford team is even putting a a team on the field is quite frankly a joke. And Frank Reich, I know he's an interim coach for 1 year and he's trying to fill in to help him out. And, Andrew Luck's there as the GM. But let me tell you something. When you got 3 timeouts and the other team's in field goal position, and yeah, there was 15 seconds left or something like that, and you let the clock run down to let them take their last timeout with 3 seconds, and then you ice the kicker with one of your timeouts and walk off the field with 2, hey, buddy, Frank, if you would have called a couple timeouts, maybe they would have fumbled the ball. I don't know. Could have got a penalty and got knocked back 10 yards, which could have took him out of field goal position. There could have been 100 million things you could have done here. But you didn't. You left the timeouts in your pocket. You walked off the field with a loss. And quite frankly, it was pathetic. If I was Stanford, I'd fire the interim head coach for this bullshit that they pulled yesterday. You don't walk off the field taking timeouts with you when you got time on the clock and the other team's in field goal position. If nothing else, you could have made them kick off. And you could have had a miracle run back. You could have done a lot of damn things. Stanford is in the Cal Stanford game where they ran the kickoff through the band. There could have been something that could have happened, Frank, but instead you kept your timeouts. You, my friend, need to go because the Stanford Cardinals are a better program than this, but they obviously aren't because they're recruiting kids that aren't very smart out there at Stanford anymore. I watched a play where this defensive kid, tackle, I think, nose guard, 3 technique, whatever he was. He made a great play on a triple reverse, dropped the player back, didn't bite on anything, stayed in position, made the tackle on the third handoff, and guess what he does? He gets up and does some kind of TikTok dance. TikTok dance? You're a Stanford Cardinal, dude. You got a tree as a mascot. You don't go dancing around, dumb shit. Geez almighty. You cost your team a penalty on that time because you wanted to TikTok it up. Well, that's just the kind of problem Stanford has. They used to have smart kids that could play football, like Christian McCaffrey and some other kids, Andrew Luck and a lot others players, John Elway to name a few. But now they obviously don't. They got a bunch of kids that want to sit around and watch TikTok videos, so when they make a sack, they get the dance on TV. Well, it was a dumb bonehead move, and it cost Stanford a game that, quite frankly, they should have won. They played terribly and still were in this game, and quite frankly, should have won the game. That's how bad this game was. Hawaii jumping around like they won the game. Hey, Hawaii, this is the Stanford Cardinal, the worst team in college football. They'll be worse than Purdue by 3 games this year, and you barely beat them. So I'd shut the hell up, get back in the Mountain West, and try to play some real football, because that's what it's going to take for you guys to win some games here in the Mountain West. But I will give it to the quarterback. He was tough. He only had 5.4 yards in a completion, threw for 2 TDs, but he was showing a lot of guts at the end of the game. But this Hawaii Rainbow Warrior team is a paper dragon out there in the Mountain West. They're not going to amount to much with the way they played the Stanford Cardinal. And I promise you, folks, I'll never bring up the Cardinal of Stanford again in this 5 Thoughts at college football unless somehow they beat, I don't know, SMU, Miami, North Carolina, Notre Dame, Boston College, BYU. I don't see it happening with this team in 3.6 yards of completion. Thought 5 on this week in college football. I don't know if I want to, but we're going to. We're going to talk about the UNLV Rebels and the fact that they almost got beat yesterday by Idaho State. That's right, FCS team Idaho State took UNLV literally to the brink of disaster in Dan Mullins' first game out there in UNLV. You Gator fans will remember Dan Mullins. Now, the Bulldogs of Mississippi State, they got a little bit fonder memories of Dan Mullins, but the Gator fans, they don't. And the UNLV fans are finding out real quick that Dan Mullins' defense is pretty much Swiss cheese and non-existent. Now, Alex Orji, transfer from Michigan, was out there in UNLV. He played and then he didn't play. No one really knows because this game wasn't even on TV in any place that I could watch it. And I'm glad I didn't, because it didn't look like a very good performance from UNLV, although they did win the game. The good news is for the rest of the Mountain West that Dan Mullins is in UNLV and his defense is going to be pretty much what we thought it would be, which isn't very damn good. So UNLV, you better step up and play a little better defense when you start playing teams like UCLA next week, which is going to be real challenging for you guys well, I think that's in 2 weeks. But anyways, it's going to be real challenging. I think they have Sam Houston next week. And Sam Houston did play pretty well against Western Kentucky. We already talked about that. Western Kentucky just had too much. But this is going to be a fun team to watch because Dan Mullins is probably not going to make this team the 11-3 team they were last year. And it'll be a challenge and a fun thing to watch, the meltdown of Dan Mullins at UNLV. Extra. We did get exciting news out of the SEC this week where they are going to go to a 9-conference game schedule in the SEC, and I can already hear the rumblings on who's going to play who and how are they going to do this 3-team, historical games where, you got 3 teams that are going to be on your schedule every year. Then they're going to do this rotation of the other teams. You'll play each team 2 times in a 4-year period, 1 home and away, basically every other year. You'll have those games on your schedule. And you can already hear the Alabama fans whining about, LSU, Tennessee, and Auburn will be their 3. Well, damn well, of course it'll be. They got the song. It literally says Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee too. I'll leave out the other part of the song that they say. So you can't have an Alabama schedule without Alabama playing Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee too. So I don't know how they're going to get around it. But guess what, folks? They've been playing that schedule for 20-some years. They played in the SEC West with Auburn and LSU every year, and they always grabbed Tennessee out of the East because that was the historic rivalry. So I don't know where they're coming up with this complaining about, and I don't know that they're all complaining. I have heard some complaining that Alabama's going to get the toughest draw. Okay, whippy-doo-dah. You're also the best team in the conference historically. So you're the best team in the conference historically. You should get the 3 teams that are historically probably your biggest competitors, and LSU and Auburn and Tennessee. So stop complaining. Now, some teams don't have 3 historic rivals, like the Georgia Bulldogs. They don't necessarily have 3 rivals like Alabama does. They got the oldest rivalry in the South in Auburn, and they got some games with the Gators and Tennessee and even Kentucky, but I wouldn't say, maybe that Florida-Georgia game is, and depending on South Carolina, it just depends on, who you talk to as a Georgia fan. But anyways, I really like the fact they're going to go to 9 games. They think the strength of schedule is going to give them some advantage in the playoffs. Look, at the end of the day, folks, the playoffs are for the hot teams and the teams that are ready to go out there and play. And if you think you're going to play a 9-game, 10-game SEC schedule with the championship game, we'll see how they do this championship game, if they're going to get rid of that too in the near future, on how this is going to work. But you're going to need to be at your best at the end of the year. And I feel we're going to have a bunch of beat-up SEC teams going to the playoffs, not fresh teams. So we'll see exactly where this goes. But I like the change. I hope the ACC comes on board and does a 9-game schedule too. And I like the fact that the SEC has said you have to play one of your games against another Power 4 conference game, and you can't schedule 3 Indiana type of games or Penn State this year, who are too scared to go out of the conference and actually schedule somebody because, heaven forbid, they could lose that game. So that's where we are with that. I'm excited to see it. I'm a college football fan, and I like bigger games, more games. The more better games for us to watch, the better college football is. So I like the change. Congratulations, SEC, on this change. Well, there's our 5 thoughts on this week in college football. That'd be week 0. All right. When we talk about the preseason Baker's Dozen and the week 0 Baker's Dozen, that's my top 13 teams of the season. or the week, and this is week 0 of the season, I'm not going to make any changes to my current preseason Baker's Dozen poll, which for you on the YouTube can see on the screen now. You in the podcast, you can go watch my Baker's Dozen show or listen to my Baker's Dozen show and you'll know where they are. But bottom line is no changes this week. After week 1, we'll definitely have some changes to make in those top 13 teams. All right, don't forget, Thursday we'll be putting out our first predictor show, week 1 predictor show. We will be looking at the matchups that are occurring on Friday night between the Auburn Tigers and the Baylor Bears, and also the Georgia Tech Ramblin' Wreck Yellow Jackets against the Colorado Buffaloes. We'll preview those 2 games along with the 4 big ones from this coming up weekend, and that will be obviously the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Texas Longhorns, Alabama Crimson Tide at Florida State, LSU at Clemson, and we'll look at Sunday's game of Notre Dame at Miami. That'll be releasing on YouTube on Thursday, so be on the lookout for that. That's not a podcast show, so for you podcasters, you'll have to go over to YouTube to watch that show. That'll be the College Football Week 1 Predictor Show by Todd Talks College Football. So we'll see where we are with those 6 games and where I think we're going to be this weekend and who's going to win those games and by how much and all that good stuff. So look for that come Thursday. All right, folks, I hope you liked your first show, Week 0, 5 thoughts on Week 0 in college football. And we will be back next Monday at the same time, 5 a.m. The podcast will drop, 12:15 Eastern Standard Time. The YouTube video will drop for the 5 thoughts on week 1 in college football. So stick around and look for that. And we'll see you on Thursday with the predictor show for you YouTubers. And remember, gather round and ALTT. See you soon.